Howdy everyone, and let's get straight into this one. The lovely little Sony lens you see before you today is their brand new E11mm f1.8, which will be coming out very soon for about £500 in the UK. I'll put final prices down in a description below for you. It's one of 3 new ultra-wide-angle lenses Sony are announcing today for their mirrorless E-mount cameras, all 3 of which offer an APS-C sized image circle. Here's what you get when shooting with it on full frame. Quite good coverage actually. So this lens is the full frame equivalent of a 16.5mm optic, meaning, well, an extremely wide angle of view, making it fantastically useful for all kinds of landscape and cityscape photography, as well as selfie stick and electronic gimbal video work. Nice. And even neater is that very bright maximum aperture of f1.8. An aperture as bright as this can get you somewhat out of focus backgrounds in your images and helps you when shooting in darker situations, particularly letting you shoot with lower ISO levels indoors and so on, which is particularly helpful when video making. It also has great potential for a bit of astrophotography. Sony have slightly neglected the ultra-wide-angle side of things on their APS-C lenses over the years though, and this lens does have a few competitors already, so let's see how well it shapes up. I'd like to thank Sony UK for loaning me an early copy of this lens for a couple of weeks for testing, although as usual this is a totally independent review. A number of things strike you the moment you hold this lens in your hand. Firstly, how very small and lightweight it is, which highlights a major advantage of all mirrorless camera systems. Their wide-angle lenses can be much smaller. This makes the lens much more flexible for travelling with you when space in your camera bag is at a premium, and also more appropriate for using on smaller size electronic gimbals for video work. Something else you notice right away is how plasticky the lens feels. Not hollow or poorly constructed, just a plasticky finish, which is admittedly getting more common these days, even on higher end lenses. The rear mount is made of metal though, with a slight weather sealing gasket to it. Although the lens is small, there are a number of focus controls on the side, an auto manual focus switch, a focus hold button, and of course a plastic manual focus ring, which turns quite smoothly. The focus motor's response to it being turned is excellent, really snappy. One nice advantage for video makers is that the lens projects very little focus breathing, as you can see here, keeping pretty much the same focal length as you focus in and out. The lens's autofocus is powered by 2 linear motors, making it work very quickly, efficiently and silently, whether you're shooting in autofocus single or continuous mode. The lens is able to take 58mm front filters, which is a great feature on an ultra-wide-angle optic, although you won't want to try and stack more than one on there for fear of vignetting in your images. It comes with a little plastic hood which can be reverse fitted onto the lens, and it does not feature image stabilization, although that's not really a big issue on such a wide-angle optic. Overall, do not let the lens's plastic exterior fool you. This thing is very well built, with excellent focusing features for video work or stills photography, and its small size and weight make it really easy to keep around with you to supplement whatever standard zoom lens you might be using. Alright then, image quality. I'll be testing this on my little Sony A5100 with its 24MP APS-C sized sensor. In-camera corrections are turned on for this test. Straight from f1.8 we see fantastic resolution and contrast in the middle of the image. Over in the corners, image quality remains nice and sharp with good contrast, although we're losing out a bit on the finest detail. The first thing I thought was that it looks a little like the corners have been stretched here to counteract barrel distortion. More about that in a minute. But nevertheless, we're seeing good detail. Stop down to f2.8 for a nice little improvement, although those corners still aren't razor sharp here. That is about as sharp as they get actually. Stop down as far as f11 and softness begins to creep in due to the effects of diffraction. Overall, we're seeing a nice sharp performance with very good contrast through and through, although the image corners shy away from achieving razor sharpness. Let's see about the lens's vignetting and distortion. The camera doesn't allow you to turn off distortion correction, which is always a bit of a red flag. Let's take some pictures in RAW and see what we are dealing with. Yes, like many manufacturers nowadays, Sony are making their cameras, not the optics, do the grunt work in fixing distortion, which is almost certainly why those image corners weren't perfectly sharp. To be fair though, everyone from third-party manufacturers to the other big boys like Canon and Nikon are taking similar approaches nowadays, as it generally means the designers can focus on making the lenses a bit smaller. When it comes to vignetting, it's obviously very strong at f1.8. Stop down to f2.8 for corners to brighten up a little, but at f4 they get far better. So obviously keep your in-camera corrections on with this one. Okay, let's move on and look at close-up image quality. If you shoot in manual focus, you can get as close as 12 centimeters to your subject, which is fantastic for getting crazy images of smaller objects. At f1.8, we see a somewhat softer image when shooting close-up, although contrast manages to remain very good. f2.8 looks quite a bit sharper, and f4 looks fantastic again. Let's see how the lens works against bright lights now. That's an important question for any wide-angle lens, which will find bright lights getting into their images very often. It's good news here. Flaring is apparent, but also fairly translucent, so the lens retains its crown of being a bit of a contrast king here. And while we're working in the dark, let's take a look for chroma smearing. Even at f1.8, bright lights in the corners of your images see almost no smearing, which is fantastic news for astrophotographers and other people who like to shoot in the dark. Let's zoom out a bit and look for sun stars now. You need to stop down as far as f8 for those to begin to emerge. At f11 they get stronger, and at f16 they look especially prominent. Despite this being an ultra-wide-angle lens for APS-C cameras, if you shoot at f1.8 and get close enough to your subject, you can get somewhat out-of-focus backgrounds. Well, just about. It's hardly a portrait lens, but generally speaking, those backgrounds look lovely and soft to me, even quite busy backgrounds such as foliage. Moderately intense specular highlights can occasionally display a slightly bitty substructure though, which doesn't look quite so pleasant, but that is a rare occurrence. And finally, related to bokeh comes longitudinal chromatic aberration. At f1.8 there's just a hint of colour fringing on bokeh highlights, but really it's nothing to worry about. Stop down to f2.8 and that is totally gone. Overall, there is plenty to like about the Sony E 11mm f1.8. From its feature set, you can't help but get the feeling that Sony were really targeting this one at video makers, but the truth is that its strong image quality makes it a perfectly nice option for stills photographers also, especially astrophotographers. The lens's small size and lightweight are other particularly nice bonuses, although a bigger, more optically complex lens might have meant even sharper corner image quality. Still, you really can't have everything. There's nothing not to like about this little monster, and its price is quite reasonable, so there's nothing left to say really except highly recommended. Let me tell you a secret, it makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside whenever big manufacturers put out little APS-C camera lenses. Not everyone wants to shoot full frame, do they? Hope you enjoyed the review, and if you find these videos helpful, check out my Patreon page for exclusive content just for my supporters, and a big thank you to those who are already making a difference over there. Your support is keeping this channel sponsorship free and trucking on. Ciao!